Good morning. Happy Friday. How is everyone doing today? Welcome to episode 6 of Braden, Moser in the Morning. Today is our first segmented episode, meaning that the first half will do one thing and the second half will do another thing. And the second half is coffee chat. It'll be our first ever coffee chat on Braden, Moser in the Morning. So welcome. Happy Friday, Bailey. Good morning, Leah. I had some technical difficulties this morning. Same audio issues, but I've ordered a new audio interface thing that was recommended to me by a friend, and it was on sale for a really good deal. So that should be here sometime soon, and then everything will be easy breezy from now on. But let's go ahead and get started with the first half of today's episode. So last episode 5 on Wednesday, we left off with letting go of the iron rod. This like kind of feeling lost, right? Like stranded in the middle of the ocean type of feeling. I completely removed all context from my life. So we'll start with that. We will wrap up that storyline. And then probably around 7:35, we will switch to coffee chat, where I'll be answering some questions that I've received since episode 1. And just chat with everybody who's here. Hopefully nobody's driving. Hopefully people can participate. Hopefully it feels like a good conversation. It's just meant to be a little like low pressure, no structured chat to get to know each other a little better. We used to do that at the law firm. Friday mornings, 9:30. Rob would bring in breakfast and we'd all have coffee, get on Zoom and play like Jackbox games and chat with each other. And that was how we got to know each other a lot better, even though we were a remote office primarily. So, last episode, letting go of the iron rod. Where are we going to go today? I think I've teased a little bit a trip that I did to Texas, which was sort of like the last moment of a normal life before things really started to crumble, come down the way the cookie crumbles. Feeling a little nervous today. Whew. This is our last calm before the storm. So I think I officially told my parents that Leah and I were no longer Mormon. Sometime between a year and maybe it was actually just 3 months. I think it was during the winter, sometime during the winter, and I put my notice in for the law firm in March. And during that time, that window between telling my parents and quitting my job, I was still really struggling and kind of wrestling with this what's the point kind of question, right? We talked about last episode, Mormonism, or my belief in Mormonism was my story. That was it gave me a beginning, a middle, and an end. Told me where we came from, what I'm supposed to be doing here, and where I'm going. It was pretty much everything I needed to direct my life with a sense of surety and intention and feeling like I knew what was going on. So when that left, I really just was lost. It felt like I was just kind of floating, no goals, no direction, no sense of like a story for my life. And that's really, like, as I've tried to find some sort of spirituality, something like to satisfy that need, the Pavlov's hierarchy of needs, spirituality, like that sense of purpose, belonging to something bigger than yourself. To me, that is a story. We want to feel like humans. We just want to feel like we're part of a story, like what we're doing is part of something bigger. And I truly just felt nothing. I felt so lost. There was a moment where I actually remember I was having like a ton of conversations with ChatGPT and just trying to be like, what are some potential, like, what's the point? Why keep struggling? Why keep pushing? And there was definitely this feeling that maybe the depression was caused by leaving the church. And that feeling of being lost was my own fault, basically. And so there was this kind of pressure to prove to my family, my friends, myself, that leaving my religion wasn't like a mistake that I was being punished for, but that this was just kind of part of the process of deconstructing your entire belief system and framework for existence. Like, obviously it's going to be a little bit disruptive, destabilizing. I just wanted to have a plan. I was constantly having those conversations with Leah, like I said, about like, this is what I'm going to do, this is who I'm going to be. But just nothing felt like it was fitting, and it was like there was no inspiration. My connection to the divine was gone, and I couldn't figure out, like, nothing felt correct to me. And I really just struggled with a ton of existential questioning. I didn't know what the point of my life was supposed to be if it wasn't to get ready for heaven. Welcome, Colin. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. And I know this is sort of some heavy stuff to wrap up around before we get into our coffee chat. But I am, in the last year, I've become quite adept at navigating these types of conversations with a sense of lightheartedness and humor. So hopefully we'll still be able to keep that good energy this morning. I think I mentioned on Wednesday that quote from Albert Camus, "You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life." And I definitely felt that, like, crushing weight of the question, what's the point? What's the meaning of all of this? Because there isn't an answer. It's one of those questions that, part of my processing, I've kind of started to look at Christianity and religion more like mythology, which I know might be offensive to some people, but for me, like, logically looking at kind of the stories of Christianity and the stories of, say, like, the Greek gods or the Mayans or like the Egyptians, like, these things that we refer to as mythology were a people's attempt at explaining the inexplainable without a whole lot of context and a whole lot of information. And as I think, as humanity started to kind of understand that, like, a little bit more, there were still some questions that we just can't answer. Like, why are we here? What's the point? Why should I continue to struggle for this life? The music is a little loud on this song. Okay, I'm going to turn down the music then. Thank you, Bailey. I appreciate it. It's kind of got a good vibe, though. Good song. Okay, so. Mythology and what was believed to be true was like their religion and their potential, their attempts at explaining the unexplainable, right? But those questions are unanswerable. They're subjective, personal answers. And so when I started to kind of look at Christianity as more of a mythology, it made it a lot easier for me to accept the truths of Christianity, or like the good fruits, the things that I still wanted to be a part of me. Like I still learned a lot of valuable lessons, and a huge part of who I am is still dictated by Christianity and the things that I took away from it. But I was just really wrestling with those questions that mythology has typically answered for us. And I think if you've known me for any amount of time, you can probably tell I'm pretty analytical. I like to think logically through things, and I like to understand why things are the way they are, how it works. So I started doing a ton of research into like science and trying to maybe find like the real answers to those questions. And I was kind of feeling this building pressure, like a pressure cooker almost, behind the scenes, that I could feel like something was off. And in the months leading up to me leaving my job, and after telling my parents that we were no longer LDS, and as I mentioned, they took it really well. They did a great job at not making me feel like I'd done something wrong or being ostracized. So that wasn't really the source of this discomfort. Maybe potentially a little bit because of internalized expectations or something. But there was this, I could just tell something's wrong with my body, with my head, with my heart, my soul, like everything. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's just something there. And the thing is, at this time, my life was good, like Leah and I were probably closer than we'd ever been. We were leaning on each other for support through this really challenging time of questioning and being destabilized. So Leah and I were super close, having really deep, intimate, connected conversations. And I had a good job. Things were looking good for Leah's career, my career. I knew I still wanted to do something different and what felt more meaningful to me. And so I felt this kind of guilt, I guess, for not being able to just enjoy what I had, right? Welcome back to another episode of a privileged white male complaining about a life that wasn't really that bad. There we go. We're back. Sorry, guys. Hello? Okay, this is so frustrating. I'm so sorry, guys. On the one day that it's supposed to be like a good conversation in a coffee chat, I'm getting so many technical difficulties. But like I said, the fix is in the mail. Bear with me, please. Leah says, your job was not good. It was extremely stressful and a toxic work environment, just FYI. There were definitely pros and cons. Like, I think it's hard to have it be so cut and dry, black and white, like a good job versus a bad job. But there were certainly some aspects that would fit that description. So like I said, I was feeling pretty guilty about not being able to just enjoy what I had, because I felt like I had a lot. I felt like I had been blessed. So like, why am I so stressed? Why am I so worried? And I think, honestly, the fact that Christianity was such a big part of my life, Mormonism was such a big part of my life. Had I just been born non-religious, not really caring about the answers to these questions, I probably could have just enjoyed my life. And that's like one of the reasons why I find the perspective of non-religious people who have never been religious so interesting, is because it's like so many of them are kind of just like, I don't really care. I don't really know what happens. It's not a question I wrestle with, struggle with. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't keep me up at night. I kind of just am like, I just go and do the same thing I've always done, right? And so to an extent, like I needed something so much because I had something so much that was such a huge part of my life. And a lot of my processing and the growth that I've had in the last year has been understanding that maybe my experience isn't as bad as some people's experience, right? Like maybe I am a white guy who had a pretty good life and was born to a middle-class family, and then maybe things went down a weird track for a little while, but we're back on track, right? But my experience, like the way I felt, was so influenced. Like we talked about the witness observer a little bit on Wednesday. The story that I was experiencing, because I had kind of come from this place of like, my parents had a successful home theater, home automation, technology, speakers. Like we had a home theater in my basement when I was 10 years old, from the ages of like 8 to 12. And I would just come home or be home, because I was homeschooled on and off during that time, and just like watch Cartoon Network in our home theater. And like, I was very privileged. I had a cushy life. I didn't really have to worry about things. And then to go from that to like dumpster diving, the high to the low, seeing the way that my youngest siblings have kind of handled their experience on the farm was almost like a parallel for me to the way that I've handled leaving religion, because all they've known is the farm. My youngest sister, Grace, was born right before we moved to Missouri and started the farm. Enoch, my youngest brother, was born in the bathtub on the farm. Like, that's all they've known, and so they don't really understand maybe how bad they have it, or like, they don't have something to contrast it to. There's no sweet to the bitter. Bailey says, that's me. Whatever happens will happen. But that makes sense, how coming from something that told you all the answers would be so jarring. Exactly. I really want to like sit down and have a full conversation with you, Bailey, or like to just talk about what that's like to just kind of be free. So I mentioned this sense of like a pressure cooker boiling in the background. And that was part of what motivated me to finally cut the cord with my job at the law firm. Like, I kind of had been tossing around the idea that I wanted to quit for a year, probably maybe. Hello. Oh, coming back. I wonder. Quick mic swap to see if that's the problem. This is like a NASCAR pit crew, guys. Just got spare tires. We're good. I think that might even be the problem, actually. That's a bummer. I got that from Facebook Marketplace from some guy, and he said it was all good. I think it might not be all good. All right. Where was I? I had the thought to quit for a while. Like, it's something that I've been wrestling over for a long time. I definitely felt this, like I said, the pressure cooker. And then Leah was saying to me, she could kind of see how my work was affecting me, because I don't know, I just take everything on, and everybody at work was stressed, and I took all that on as my own. I had a pretty big project that was my sole responsibility. I was like the only person that it kind of was like all on top of me, right? So I felt a lot of pressure, couldn't leave. And then there was this moment where it was like, maybe now's a good time. And Leah said that she would leave me if I didn't leave my job, because I don't think she was serious, but it was like, she could tell that I needed maybe a little bit of encouragement to finally take that leap, right? Because I'm a bit of a people pleaser. So I quit, and I was like, I'm gonna start my own business. I'm gonna do this freelance thing for a while while I ramp up my own business. I'm gonna start a podcast. I'm gonna rule the world, write my story, live my dreams. All these amazing things that I've always wanted to do since I was a kid, when I said, when I grow up, I'm going to do this, right? And then I grew up and I found out you have bills and insurance and taxes and woo, adulting, woo, everything I wanted it to be and more. I didn't read the fine print. And things were good at first. Like, I immediately landed some clients. I worked with another law firm in Florida for a little bit that was referred to me by a contact I had. I had some other people reaching out to me, hoping to work together. I got invited to go to Texas, to fly to Texas to potentially be a part of a cool startup opportunity at the intersection of marketing and tech and local businesses and the trades. Like, it was like this fantastic opportunity merging together all of the experience that I had, and I was like, oh, this is the thing. This is a sign. Like, the universe is finally helping me. This is, if there is a God, it's the God is pulling the strings behind the scene, making things line up, working. I got on the plane and I read this book on the flight. It was like 7 spiritual laws. It's this teeny pamphlet book that I bought, and it, I guess, gave me a lot to think about. And while I was there, some stuff happened that rocked the boat of my brain. And we'll talk about that on Monday. We've covered a lot this morning. I know it's been a little bit heavy, wrestling with existential dread with a side of coffee. Let's pivot. We're going to get to something a little lighter, a little more interactive. We've got coffee chat. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever coffee chat segment on Braden Moser in the morning. I am drinking. Leah and I like to buy these coffee beans from Costco that are like the organic one, from single origin or whatever, and we're trying to like find fancy, delicious flavors, and we've had a couple that are really good, but it has been a little hit or miss. The beans I've got right now, they've got a very broad coffee profile. We'll say that, right? So whatever you're drinking this morning, cheers. I hope it's delicious. And then I just added some caramel and milk and a little bit of chocolate syrup to try and sweeten it because it is pretty bitter. That's what I'm drinking this morning. What is everybody else having? Water? Getting motivated? And this is where you can ask questions now. Yes. So, like I said, this coffee chat, we'll start off with, I'm going to answer a few questions that have been commented or messaged to me. I have some comments on a few videos. So, one of the questions that I've gotten is from the Millicow. And he's actually somebody that I knew in high school. We met when I was in that Skills USA IT program. And so he saw kind of a small sliver of my life when I was like at a peak. He left a comment on my video and he said, I relate to so much of this, the social anxiety, the lack of social skills, and this was from episode 2. Sometimes frick is good. He says, I was homeschooled until 3rd grade and might be somewhat autistic too. Cheers to that. Still trying to figure out what I got. Struggling to open up with my trauma and the fact that I somehow passed high school despite slacking in some of my classes. And then he says, I'm a little surprised by all of this because from my perspective, you had everything together when we were in school. We were working hard in the class and you were working hard in the class and going above and beyond, and I didn't have the mental or emotional capacity to handle anything like that. The anxiety and intrusive thoughts weighed heavy, and all I could do was pretend to function socially. You seemed so stable and confident, but I could sense the depth in you too, so I'm also not surprised by what you're sharing. And I like how, though you may be scatterbrained and tell the story non-linearly, you always circle back around and fill in the gaps, and I can still follow the story. I agree, it's authentic. Looking forward to the rest of the video. You really hit home when you started talking about purpose and using time wisely. I realized early on in life how important that is. Music was always my thing, so my approach was to just start working and make music in my free time until I can eventually replace my job and give me freedom to spend more time with my family and put my energy there instead of work, or die trying. Rationally speaking, it's a stupid idea, but the main hurdle in this situation is perseverance. My mind is so set that giving up on this isn't even a question. So not fully a question, but something to chat about. I wanted to respond to this. I think I've been pretty good at masking. Obviously, I've had ADHD my whole life. It's not really something that you develop or comes and goes. My brain is structured differently. And with that, there comes this concept called masking, where you pretend to be normal or act the way that you're expected to in certain situations. And I think I've always been pretty good at masking. I mentioned a little bit that I've experienced some bullying in my life. A decent amount, actually. And I would cope with that by kind of putting on this shield of overconfidence. I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. They use like humor or just being this like strong lone wolf, confident in themselves, nothing matters type of energy, right? And so he kind of saw a little bit of that. And also just school compared to working on a farm is so easy and just like fun compared to like go milk the cows, go scrape up poop. So it's all a matter of perspective, right? Like it all a matter of perspective. And that's why Sonder and being aware of other people's story is so important. Because you only see such a small piece, and we might label that person as what we saw, right? I mentioned like if you're walking down the street and you see some guy catcall, like he's a construction worker and he's hanging out with his buddies on his lunch break and he catcalls some girl. And you're just thinking like that guy is a douche catcalling some girl, right? But I mean, that social situation is gonna make him act and behave in a certain way. But we now just think of that guy as the catcalling guy for the rest of our lives, when he has so much depth to him, and actually he's a really good guy. That's why I say I hate small talk, but really I don't think I like the shield talk, the stuff that we put up. How are you doing? I'm fine, how are you? You know? Just going through the motions, making noise. Alright, Leah says, what do you wish people without ADHD people knew about people with ADHD? And how has it been for you to be in a relationship with someone without ADHD? Wow, this is a great question. It's almost like you know exactly what it's like from your perspective. What do I wish people without ADHD knew about people with ADHD? It's not really an attention deficit. It's not really a hyperactivity. It's more of like, this is how I think about it. ADHDers, evolutionarily, we served a purpose. There is actually an advantage to having variation in a species and having like distributed roles. Some people being specialized at other things, and other people being specialized at other things. And as hunters and gatherers, in a world that was dangerous, constantly trying to kill you, ADHDers have a very wide lens of focus that is kind of always taking in as much information as possible. So like imagine you're walking through the forest and you're aware of every sound, every snap of a twig, so that you can alert the tribe of something. And it has to be able to go from a really broad, like I'm aware of all of my surroundings as much as I possibly can be, like super tuned in, to what was that? Like I'm going to investigate, right? Which is exactly how ADHDers are. And in a society that's built around like consistent output and sitting still for 8 hours, that isn't super conducive towards this like being super aware, and then when something stands out to you, zone in for a second and figure out what it is. So it's why you get this like squirrel, oh, what the heck was that? Like you just get distracted because when you're not hyper focused on something, your awareness and your sensitivity to stimuli is just super wide open, really broad. So everything stands out to you. And it's one of the reasons why I listen to background music during the stream. I could mute it. Like I can still hear it right now. I can turn it down so now you guys can't hear the music, but I still can. But I kind of like the music. I feel like it helps me and others focus during the moments of silence, because sometimes I have to just sit here and collect my thoughts. But essentially, what's actually happening in my brain is that this noise is acting as, it's kind of raising the floor of what stimuli will stand out, right? So, I don't know how technical I want to get in that explanation, but I think that's a good way. Like, if you hear a lot of noises around you, and then, like, if the vacuum's on and somebody drops a spoon in the kitchen, you're not going to hear it, right? And so background music for me, this like instrumental, kind of has a rhythm, acts as like the vacuum in my brain that keeps me from getting distracted by the spoon falling in the kitchen. And I like need music if I'm cleaning or doing something that requires me to focus for a second. The way I got through college is that I would sit down, I would make myself a cup of hot chocolate because I couldn't drink coffee, and then it would be like 10 p.m. and I'd put on these lo-fi beats, and I'd lock in, and I'd bang out a paper in an hour. And to address the second part of that question, how has it been for you to be in a relationship with someone without ADHD? Really insightful. It's been, I mean, I've learned more about myself through Leah than I've learned in my entire life before I met Leah. She is like the mirror that allows me to see where maybe the way that I do things isn't very functional. Leah is also super organized. She's one of the most organized people that I've ever met in my entire life, which is not that impressive of a stat considering I've met like 9 people, because most of them are my family members when I lived on the farm, and all of us probably have ADHD or something. But Leah truly is just like organized. And so being able to see the way that she does things and the way that I do things, sometimes I like in this society, those traits that Leah has are a little bit more valued, like in a career space, in a school space. Like, she just has her shit together, like, for lack of a better term. And I'm a hot mess. Or at least I feel like a hot mess. And so I think one of the struggles of being in a relationship with somebody without ADHD is a little bit of that shame cycle of trying to just not tell myself that I'm dysfunctional or that I'm bad because I do things in a different way, but really trying to like lean into my strengths. So Bailey says, I think Sonder is super interesting. Since my sister and brother-in-law moved to the South, they've been confronted with some traditional Southern people. Thoughts on things like the Confederacy? Dang. For me, that's crazy. There's no gray area, but for them, they're like, yeah, these super normal, nice people also have these other political views, and it's really crazy. No real question here, but I think it's cool you're aware that people have stories that make up the world, and it's worth listening. Exactly. This is going to be an extreme example, but Hitler had a reason for having his beliefs. I have no idea what they were. I could never agree with anything like that. But it came from somewhere. It doesn't make it valid. And that's the same thing that applies here, right? So I think it's one thing to hold space and understanding for people's story, but just because someone's story is the way that it was, like it's literally written in the storyline of their life, doesn't mean they can't change and that they shouldn't change. You have to be able to pivot and write a new storyline, because some stuff ain't it. And maybe some of those Southern beliefs, Southern political opinions, need to evolve and change a little bit, even though their story is real. And I understand, like, I don't hold it against them that they have those beliefs, but I keep my safe distance. Which is something that, like, having ADHD, having trauma, having, like, all of these things, I have to wrestle with too, because I can't use my story as an excuse or just like a justification for this is why I'm the way I am. Like, I have to take into account my story. Look at where I'm at right now, and then take the steps to change things the way I want it to be. I don't know what instrument this is, but I wish I could play it. Leah says, I don't think I'm that organized, but compared to you, I am. Yeah, that's so true. There's this thing called ADHD piles, which is for some reason like this common thread for all ADHDers, where they sort of just organize things in piles that are still out and about. But like for some reason it just satisfies the like itch in the brain to clean up. And yesterday Leah watched me put like a measuring cup on the counter above the drawer that the measuring cups go in. And I like started making a pile literally 6 inches through the counter from where it was supposed to actually be. Mm. Sometimes these songs have lyrics. I don't like that. For us, organizing is just putting things in their correct rooms, and that's a sense of piling. But I love it. I wish I could do that. I wish I could just set things in the right room on the floor right next to the door and then not get yelled at. Just kidding. I don't get yelled at. My wife loves me. Bailey asks, have you had any conversations with your siblings about what they're going through / what you went through? Yeah. Short answer. Myra is the second. She's 1 year younger than I am. So she and I have a pretty similar experience, right? She was only 10 or 11 when we moved to the farm. I was 12. And so we both have a similar perspective of things. But Myra takes more responsibility onto herself. Like she feels like it's her job almost, maybe, to help more than I do. I think I kind of felt like I served my time, and when I turned 18, I was like, I'm out of here. And I just tried to have my own life. She's a little bit more attached. Some of my other siblings kind of love things, maybe. I don't know, actually. Like, it's so weird how oldest, middle child, youngest child dynamics come into play within the whole context of the story, of my story. Some of the kids don't really feel traumatized or slighted or like they don't have the frustration or maybe like the anger that I experienced. So sometimes when I say things where I'm like calling my mom out or my dad out for something that I remember a certain way, people will sometimes correct me and say like, well, that didn't actually happen, or like it didn't happen exactly like that. Sometimes I feel a little bit gaslighted because it's like you actually don't know what it was like for me. That's a harder question than I expected it to be, Bailey. You stumped me a little bit. Maybe in the future, I'll try and do an episode with each of my siblings and get like the gist of their experience with the farm. I think that'd be super cool to give you guys that perspective, but also to have a place where we can have the conversation just between us, like one-on-one with one of my siblings, because we often have these conversations in group dynamics, which changes things a lot. Colin says you're way too smart to be gaslit. I appreciate the compliment. But I think I'm surprisingly susceptible to being gaslit. I have always been told doubt my doubts. And so if I say something and somebody disagrees with me and I doubt that what they said is true, I gotta doubt my doubts and defer my opinion or my beliefs to somebody else, which is kind of one of the ways that Mormonism maybe influenced me. Colin says, ironic statement because it is itself a form of gaslighting. LOL. You're way too smart to be gaslit. That's a good point. That's actually hilarious. That if you told somebody that, you're invalidating their experience of being gaslit. That's some meta stuff right there. Some full-blown gas lamping. Okay, I had some other questions or comments that I wanted to talk about. So, Aceman11100, my good friend, commented on the video on episode 4. He said, you mentioned the CES letter and I was interested, so I looked it up. It's really interesting to read for someone who has no knowledge of this religion, even if I just skimmed through some parts. I appreciate how you did not recommend people to read it if they are happy with their faith and just mentioned its importance to yours and Leah's story. And I just want to say thank you, Aceman, for sharing that with me. It's cool that you looked it up and did your own research, and I appreciate that you appreciate that I did not recommend people to read it if they're happy. I think a lot of people... I actually had a conversation about this with Daniel. Comes in the stream every once in a while. And Leah, actually, she was like, I think everyone should read the CES letter. Because it's just good to be informed about the religion that you pay 10% of your income to. But I kind of think that some people are better because of religion, and some people would be so like lost without it that it wouldn't be a good thing for them to lose it, right? I think I've had experience dealing with big, hairy, uncomfortable questions and situations more than maybe most 26-year-olds have. Considering that, like, I've had countless dinner table conversations about pornography addiction and my parents' relationship and how we can apply religious theology to our situation in a way that, like, doesn't mean my family is in shambles. And so I think I just don't I don't think it's the best idea for some people. There was this podcast that Leah and I listened to when I was doing research on alternative treatments for depression. One of those being the research that they're doing on psilocybin treatments. And there are some therapists who will do kind of like guided experience in some states where the local laws allow, or maybe they just are a little secretive. But there was the story of this Mormon girl who did a kind of a small amount of shrooms and went into psychosis because, well, at least my theory is that she saw her life from a different perspective. There's an analogy that psilocybin or psychedelics kind of are like a fresh layer of snow in your brain. And if you've ever been skiing or snowboarding or sledding or driven on a dirt road with tracks like worn into the mud, it's hard to go on it's hard to deviate from the path that has been taken so many times. And our brains, they adapt. And when we do things a certain way, or we have certain thought patterns, those become stronger and stronger and stronger, like tracks in a dirt road or ski tracks on a slope. And there's this analogy that these types of medicines are like a fresh coat of snow, allowing you to take new paths and kind of disrupt your thought patterns, your existing habits and ways of thinking. And so my thought is that this girl did her trip and just saw her life from an outside perspective, and seeing Mormonism and the life that you lived because of Mormonism from an outside perspective. She had kids, she'd been married at a young age. Like, that's going to be destabilizing to maybe see that your life was heavily influenced by something that you've not even really done a whole lot of critical research on. And if you listen to the church's advice to not consume anything that isn't church approved, like church media, and like to not do research in any place that isn't a church resource, you're only getting one perspective of the story. I think I got a little bit distracted there. Net, at the end of the day, the point is, other ways of saying, anyways, if you're happy with your religion, if you're happy with the story that you're living, no need to change it. No need to disrupt it. Unless it's affecting other people in a negative way, which is where Leah's side of the argument comes in, that she thinks that maybe Mormonism perpetuates a few things that aren't super helpful for people, like shame. And Colin says, I've always considered the true importance of religion to be community and security, not so much the theological aspect of it. Yes. Yep. I think it gives you a story to bond around. It lets you easily understand the belief system and the moral system and the ethics system of somebody else. Like, part of the reason Leah and I were able to get married after dating for less than a year was because we sort of felt like we aligned because we had the same belief system. So there was this whole chunk of like stuff that we could kind of just assume we're good. So religion gives you that language and that shared experience to be able to connect and feel safe around other people. I also think that religion is something that used, it's a tool to help control the masses. It's kind of like if you tell people, hey, don't kill each other, don't steal, drive the speed limit, you know, good things, good advice. And they're like, why not? What? You need me to explain that to you? Because I said so. And they're like, I don't know. I don't think because I said so is a good enough reason. Okay. Because the really jacked dude in a robe that lives on top of that mountain will throw lightning at you if you do something that is not good. And here's the rules of things that are not good. And you can bend those rules however you want to. I know this isn't meant to be the topic of the episode, but I saw a clip of the prophet, President Nelson, talking about the end of days at General Conference. So General Conference is this like twice a year event every 6 months. The prophets and apostles of the LDS Church do a live broadcast over the course of 3 days, and they basically say like, yo, here's the deets, here's the updates, this is what's going on, latest patch notes to the doctrine and to the church policies, and like we're building all of these temples in all these different places, things are getting cool, and then also like we're gonna tell you the current things that you should be focusing on to align yourself with God. That's the idea or the concept behind it. Almost every single one is pretty much the exact same thing that you hear every Sunday. There's no new information pretty much ever. But in this last General Conference, which happened in April, President Nelson said, I actually don't want to misquote him. President Nelson, April 2025, end of days quote. Let's see if this. Here's the AI overview. In his April 2025 General Conference address, President Russell M. Nelson spoke about the importance of preparing for the second coming of Jesus Christ and emphasized the need to, quote, get ready for that great and dreadful day, unquote. He urged members to increase their time in the temple, which he said helps them prepare for the Savior's return. President Nelson also highlighted the need to cultivate charity and virtue, as these qualities will increase confidence before God. So, he said, he first started off basically by saying, like, I don't know when this is going to happen, but I feel prompted to tell you to get ready for that great and dreadful day. Which is the same thing they've been saying for since the start of the church. Joseph Smith said, it's coming. You better get ready. Like, it's like right now. It just gives you this sense of urgency, like, I got to take action right now. And then he urged members to increase their time in the temple, which he said helps them prepare for the Savior's return. When you go through the temple, it's the exact same experience every single time on purpose. And in order to go to the temple, you need to have a temple recommend, which is something that all prophets have encouraged people to, even if you aren't going to the temple, to maintain an active temple recommend. And in order to have an active temple recommend, you have to pass the worthiness interview, which is are you honest in your dealings with your fellow man? Do you still believe in the church? Do you support any groups that are anti-church? Like, are you following the word of wisdom? The law of chastity, which is like all of the sex rules. Are you wearing your garments if you have them? Like those types of questions, right? And one of the questions is, are you a full tithe payer? And that means like, have you paid 10% actually of your income? And you just say yes, and then you move on. And then the only question from that entire interview that they follow up on, it's not like, they don't do like a word of wisdom review where they make sure that you know coffee's not good for you to drink. Or they don't do a law of chastity review where they're like, hey, let's make sure that you understand that soaking is still sex. And that you can't just go to BYU and, you know, soak it away. Your friend can't jump on the bed and it doesn't matter. Both holes count. Like that kind of stuff. The only one they follow up on is, hey, where's my money? They pull up the receipts, right? So he urged members to increase their time in the temple. And they clearly emphasize that the one thing you have to really make sure that you do in order to get to the temple is pay your tithing. And then he's like, oh, and also like charity and virtue and stuff. You know, charity. Share what you have with the people around you. If you have $450 billion, you know, spread the love. You know, be virtuous. Honesty. You know, don't tell white lies. Don't paint pictures that aren't true. That stuff, you know, the good things that everybody should actually be following. Insert tea sipping sound. I know that that's not quite the reason, but I wish that people could see critically the line of reasoning. And I just know that one of the other talks, I'm positive, was about the power of paying tithing and the urgency that we need to go to the temple, which is all just it's just a sales pitch to make sure people are doing like if you say do this thing and one of the prerequisites to doing this thing is paying the subscription fee for your little card to get into the white building, and you're saying go to this, you are also saying do every step in front of it, including the subscription fee. Coincidence? I think not. Bailey asked, do I have any regrets? I have so many. Well, no, actually, hold on. I have had a lot of things I regretted. I don't currently have regrets. I have things that I'm grieving, processing. But I feel like I've always been pretty good at just accepting like, that happened. It is what it is. I'll do better next time, or if I'm confronted with a situation where I can go one of two ways, I'll maybe do something different next time. But also I've been doing like a ton of research into like the fourth dimension and quantum physics and alternate realities, parallel worlds, multiple worlds theory, string theory, like, and so as far as that stuff goes, I mean, the evidence, the leading theories show that every time we make a decision, there's a reality in which the other decision was made. So somewhere out there, applying the Sonder principle, there's a version of myself that is living his best life. So there's no point in me regretting it. This is just one of the lives that I could have, like one of the timelines, and my consciousness is just on this timeline. We're getting real woo-woo here without the opportunity to explain the science backing my thoughts. We'll get to that one day. But I know you probably wanted the tea, and so here's some tea. I do regret not being more like firm with saying that I wanted to go to school when I was 12. man, I don't actually have any regrets. I can't find any. I'm so sorry. I have some embarrassing stories, but even then, like, I've gotten pretty good at blocking things out I don't want to think about. So it's just, I'll have to do some journaling and see if I can pull out some stuff. Biggest regrets as a 26-year-old Mormon, ex-Mormon. Leah says that the church perpetuates harm to women, minorities, the LGBTQ community, and anyone who doesn't believe the same as them. And I think that most people's who are Mormons' response to that would be, well, the church doesn't do that, it's the people. Or they're just following God's will when it comes to the LGBTQ stuff. Like, it's not their fault God says gays are bad. It's not their fault the man in the sky said they don't like these people. Colin says, patch notes to the doctrine is a perfect description. And then Leah says, it's a business. And Leah says, it's also their doctrine. Yeah, the doctrine. But again, it's hard to argue against that, because it's kind of, the belief in the doctrine is predicated by the fact that it's not going to be accepted by the world, essentially, like that it's not the natural thing to believe. It's like, and that the challenges of the LGBTQ community are just like the challenges God gave them for this life, to not be able to experience love with the person that they want to. And that's just their challenge. God gives their hardest battles to some people. And, you know, for me, I lost my keys and I said a prayer and I found them. And for them, their whole life is just like wrong. Everything they feel inside is wrong. Oh, here's something interesting. So in that AI overview of President Nelson's Get Ready for the Great and Dreadful Day talk, it breaks down, it says, here's a more detailed breakdown of President Nelson's message. President Nelson stressed the importance of being prepared for the second coming of Jesus Christ, a time that, while unknown in exact timing, is imminent. Be prepared for something that's coming. Is that not fear-mongering? If you have no actual proof or evidence that something bad is going to happen, you're just saying, like, it's going to happen soon. And I don't know, that just feels like kind of spreading fear. Or like, for some people, maybe it isn't a fearful thing. I remember actually when I was in the church, I was like, I'm so excited for the second coming of Jesus because he's going to fix the world. He's going to get rid of all the bad people, and the whole world is going to no longer have any litter. He's going to pick up all the cigarette butts. So I used to think that it was like this amazing time, but stressing the importance of being prepared. A lot of Christians don't really think you need to prepare for it. You just need to accept Christ. That your works don't really matter. You're saved by faith. I don't know. Not fully this point of this episode, but I'm enjoying talking about this. Okay, temple work. He encouraged members to increase their temple attendance as it helps them grow spiritually and prepare for the Savior's return. Another aspect that's interesting to me is that temple attendance hardly increases the cost that the church takes on. The expense it hardly increases the expense, because everybody who works in the temple is a volunteer. I've been thinking a little bit like, how did the church get $450 billion? How other churches pay people who work in the church. You can get a job as a pastor or a job as a church custodian, meaning you're cleaning the church. In the Mormon church, they just kind of invite you. They're like, we're not telling you have to be a bishop for free. But kind of like God is saying you have to. God says, hey, you got to give us like 40 hours a week. And you're going to get blessings for sure. Somehow, somewhere, as long as you're faithful enough, you'll get blessings. But keep paying your tithing and come run this church for us for free. That's how they have $450 billion, is they don't pay their employees. Because they call it volunteer work, but it's really voluntold work. And then they shame you if you say, I don't have enough time. Sorry. I have a job, and I'm also the coach of a high school football team, and I have 7 kids. I'm not talking about anyone in particular here, but it's just that's such a common thing, is that people are just stretched so thin and asked to lean on God for this invisible support and continue paying your tithing. Be faithful. Next, he said, charity and virtue. President Nelson emphasized the importance of cultivating charity and virtue in our lives, as these qualities strengthen our relationship with God and prepare us for his coming. How strong does my relationship with God need to be in order for me to qualify to as prepared? Like if I can bench 135, a full plate, that's how strong my relationship with God is. Is that enough? Like if I'm only able to do, let's say, 115. What if I'm only able to do that? Is that where I get cut off? Not strong enough. He invited individuals to grow in their confidence before the Lord by seeking to have charity and virtue fill their lives, which will increase their faith in Jesus Christ and spiritual power. The more that you do this thing, the more you're going to believe in Jesus Christ, and you'll have so much more invisible power. And you're going to get so many more invisible mansions in heaven, as long as you keep paying your subscription fee. President Nelson also spoke about the great blessings and miracles that will be bestowed upon the faithful between now and the Savior's return. The great blessings and miracles. In the meantime, it's coming. The second coming, it's coming. We don't know the exact timing. It's imminent. And between now and then, you're going to get a lot of great blessings and miracles, as long as you continue to attend the temple and pay that subscription fee. Where are those blessings going to come from? Where are those miracles going to come from? I don't know. Keep your eyes open. You'll find something if you're looking for it. Interesting. Okay, sorry. I was reading ahead a little bit silently in my head. Living the gospel. He encouraged members to live the gospel, to be actively involved in preparation, and to not let their lives be unproductive. I think it would be fun one day to do an episode where I just kind of break down a talk like that and ask questions, and maybe one day somebody will listen. All right, 8:20 a.m. We went over, as coffee chats tend to do. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Thank you for being involved in the conversation. I hope that you have a lovely day. Final note, P.S. The Truman Show traumatized me. This is such a pivot. This is such an ADHD pivot. The Truman Show traumatized me. It stuck with me my whole life. But one thing that he said, when he would walk outside, he'd see his neighbors and he'd say, "Good morning. And in case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night." Something like that. And I kind of want to incorporate that as a sign off. I want to start the show with a "good morning, love you, thank you for being here," and end the show with a "in case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Love you. See you Monday. Have a great weekend."